All right, today I'm going to give you an introduction to the language arts GED test. I'm going to tell you what to expect on the test, what kind of questions you'll encounter. I'm going to talk about the sort of things that won't be on the test so you can not bother to study for them. I'll talk about some tricks you can use, some things that will be helpful for you to know when you take the test. And finally, at the end, I'll go over one typical RLA, reasoning through language arts question, the sort of thing that you would encounter when you take the test. All right, let's get to it. So here's an overview of the test. It's the longest test. It is 150 minutes. That's 2.5 hours, a good chunk of your afternoon. It is the second hardest test to pass. Only math is harder statistically. There are 3 sections and 1 break in between. There's about 45-ish multiple choice-y questions, and there's 1 essay. It's the only test of all 4 subject tests of the GED that has any writing on it at all. It's an essay you write that's graded by artificial intelligence, by a computer algorithm, and it's worth about 20% of your total score. It usually costs $30 to $40, depending on what state you live in. You can go online to see how much it costs in your state. So what does it cover? It covers mostly 75% informational texts. And informational text is like this kind of stuff: speeches, articles, historical documents, instruction manuals, job cover letters, office memos, things that are real life nonfiction writing that you might encounter in your day-to-day life. They want you to be able to reason through how this kind of language is trying to do how it's trying to achieve its object, how it's trying to get done whatever it's trying to do. That leaves about 25%, 1/4, for literary texts, which are the sort of novels and short stories that high school English classes make you read. So what is it not? It is not a memorization test. Just like any of the other tests, you don't have to memorize pretty much anything. There won't be a question, who wrote The Telltale Heart, or what century was Shakespeare born in? Like, none of that stuff. It's also not a lit exam, so there won't be any Shakespeare, or really anyone whose writing is so hard that they need to have little footnotes to explain what the different words mean. Nothing like that. There's also going to be no questions about literary or poetry definitions. They won't ask you what a metaphor is, or an analogy, or iambic pentameter, all these sort of like lit terms that maybe you would have had to study for on a high school test. They won't ask you these things. However, there's a little asterisk. Ding. Should have made a sound effect when that appeared, but it doesn't hurt to know these things. If you know figurative language and what figurative language is, and some of the terms that apply to that, analogy, metaphor, simile, that can help you. That's not unhelpful. All right. Also, what this test is, it is a reading comprehension test. Just like the other 3. Science test is a reading comprehension test about science. The social studies is a reading comprehension test about government and history and economics and geography. This is a reading comprehension test about pretty much any other kind of writing that you would encounter. And you might even encounter some social studies-ish stuff, or even some science-ish stuff. The sort of things that you'll be asked to do: you'll be given a chunk of text, and probably the most common and most fundamental question they'll ask you is, what is the main idea of this text? What is the thing that the author wants you to know after reading this? They might also ask you to understand or identify what the purpose of what you just wrote was. Is it trying to argue or persuade in some way? That's a pretty common, popular question. Or make inferences and draw conclusions. The author will be talking about something, but not come right out and say it. It'll be up to you to make an inference and draw a conclusion about what the author's really talking about. It is also a writing test. This is the only test that has writing in it. And there are 3 categories that your writing will be judged on. The first one is argument and evidence. Can you make a clear, coherent argument about something and then back it up with quotes from the text and examples from the text? Can you organize your writing well? Can you start with an introduction that has a thesis in it, have a couple of body paragraphs that expand on the thesis, and then wrap it up all together with a conclusion? And finally, how good are you with language? Are you confident? Do you mix up your syntax? Do you use fancy vocabulary words? Or does your writing look like a text message or a tweet? The good thing about the writing for us is that the essay is always the same. The prompt is always this: analyze which of these two competing texts better supports its argument. So they're going to give you a pro and a con, usually, about something. One guy will say, I think summer is the most wonderful month, the most wonderful season of the year. And someone else will write an op-ed opinion piece that says, I think winter is the best season. And then it will be up to you not to agree with one or the other. That will get you nowhere. It's not about your opinion. It's about which of the two people making the argument did a better job, which one supported his or her argument better. It won't be something as stupid as which is the best season, but it could be the one they have on their website, the GED, is something about recyclable plastic bags. Should we outlaw them at supermarkets or not? Something like that. And you'll be tempted to agree with a position because everyone has opinions about a lot of stuff, but don't do that. All right, some things that will be helpful to be able to do on this test. First, know how to write a 5-paragraph essay, including a thesis, what we were just talking about with the introduction, the body paragraphs, and the conclusion. There are a lot of websites and YouTube videos. I have one on my channel about this specific essay. If you know how to do it and you practice it, that's all they're looking for, is a 5-paragraph persuasive essay. And you'll be ready for the writing part of the test. You should also, maybe if you can, practice with old stuff, olden days texts. So they might throw the US Constitution at you. Things with the kind of language we don't use anymore. And if you're comfortable reading something from Edgar Allan Poe, who died in the 1800s and is pretty dense and pretty tough and uses a lot of difficult vocabulary, if you practice with that will help you for the harder stuff that shows up on the test. Also, morphology. Morphology is a fancy way of saying how words are set up, what goes into a word. For example, the word morphology has morph in it. Morph means shape. It comes from Greek. So morphology is like the study of shapes. In this case, it's the study of shapes of words. Maybe you know the word metamorphosis. That's beyond a shape. It's a shape that transforms into something else. It metamorphosizes. So if you can look at these words and kind of see where they come from, when they hit you with some difficult vocabulary, you might be able to reason your way out of it. That might be helpful. None of these things are essential. You can absolutely pass the test having no idea how to write a 5-paragraph essay, or having read nothing before 1987, or knowing no prefixes. Prefixes, the word prefix, pre means before. See, there's another prefix in the word prefix. All right, how do you prepare for this? It's the same for all of these videos, for all four tests. You should first of all take the GED Ready test. That will tell you how you're doing, how close you are to passing right now, and it will tell you what you can work on, what skills you can study to improve that score to get it up to passing. You can take classes, go to the GED website, enter your zip code. There may be free classes near you, or there are classes you could pay for online, or classes you might be able to pay for at a community college near you, lots of different stuff. You can get a book from Target or Walmart or Amazon, the Kaplan book or the Steck-Vaughan workbooks. All of those are good if you're a self-motivated kind of person. You have made it this far in the YouTube video, so good for you. You obviously can watch some YouTube videos. You can also join GED groups on Facebook or Reddit if you want a positive mutually supporting atmosphere where people kind of encourage each other to keep going with this stuff. All right, that is an overview of the test, how to prepare for it. Let's look at a typical question. I'm not going to read through this. I would totally and heartily encourage you to pause the video here, read this question over and see if you can get an answer, and I'll go through it and talk about how I would approach this. Okay, unpaused. The first thing I'm going to do is read the question, and the question really is this: what is the main idea of the passage? So sometimes it helps when you read a question before you read the big chunk of text in the middle. It will help you know what you're looking for when you start reading. This one is pretty general. What's the main idea? What does the author want me, the reader, to come away from this paragraph understanding? And I'm going to look not for the right answer. I'm going to look for the wrong answer so I can eliminate some of these possibilities and improve my chances of getting it right through process of elimination. So the first one says, racism is as serious a problem today as it was in the time of slavery. So nothing specifically jumped out at me in this paragraph about racism. I don't really see that this is necessarily about racism. It does use the word Negro, and Negro is a word that is not offensive today, but definitely dated. It's a word nobody, it seems, even to say it seems super weird. But that's a different word than the offensive one. So it's not necessarily about racism. And it also about slavery. I don't really see much about slavery in here either. And if I'm going to read the end here, there's an inference I can make that will tell me it's not about slavery. This is sort of in the make inferences category of questions. It says here, let us turn our faces to the Black Belt of Georgia and seek simply to know the condition of the black farm laborers of one county there. Well, if this were during the time of slavery, they wouldn't be referred to in Georgia as laborers. They would be slaves. So this is after slavery ended. So there's too many red flags about racism and slavery. I'm going to eliminate it. It's not A. The best way to understand the condition of black people is through personal contact. That one, if you look in the middle of the paragraph, it says, all this we can only learn by intimate contact with the masses and not by wholesale arguments covering millions separate in time and space. So that one seems okay. Is that the main idea? I don't know. It's definitely being talked about, unlike slavery and racism. So I'm going to keep that one around, B, to the next round. C, people often make assumptions about black people's lives. Well, it does say, it is so much easier to assume that we know all about the condition of black folks. Or perhaps having already reached conclusions in our mind, we are loath to have them disturbed by facts. That's about making assumptions. Is that the main idea? I don't know. But also, like B, is a pretty solid answer. So B and C I'm going to keep around. D, no one understands what it's like to be a black person in the United States. So again, there's some red flags here with D. And the first is this no one understands. Whenever I see an answer that is no one or everyone or never or always, it's one of those like all or nothing, black and white answers. I really look very carefully to make sure it really is all or nothing. No one understands what it's like to be a black person in the United States. There's a lot of black people in the United States who probably have a pretty good idea of what it's like to be a black person in the United States. And you may or may not know this, but W.E.B. Du Bois is himself a black man. So that one it smells wrong, you know. It's not going to be D. So it's either B or C. Which of these two is the main idea? The thing that the author really wants us to understand? Is it that people make assumptions, or is it that the best way to understand the condition of black people is through personal contact? And I think because of the way the paragraph ends, that they're about to go off and turn their faces to some black farm laborers in one county in Georgia, that seems to me to be like personal contact, getting to know people. That seems more important to me than just making assumptions. If it were more about making assumptions, it wouldn't just show up at the beginning of the paragraph. It would sort of support that that idea that people make assumptions about black people. This would be about assumptions, and it's not. So the best answer here is B. All right, that is a typical question. Hopefully, this was helpful getting you familiarized with what you're going to face when you take the RLA test, the Reasoning Through Language Arts test. Good luck, everyone.